Good evening.
Hello, sir. Good evening, sir.
Good evening, sir.
Good evening. What were we supposed to be doing today?
Pick up any author, any thinker.
Pick up any
We
author.
were doing Marx, sir.
Yeah,
Mhm.
that's what I wanted to know. Because if I pick up Habermas, Foucault, and all that, that'll become it'll become a little arbitrary because you'll have to know Marx in order to understand Habermas. So let's get going. Yeah, so let's get going. And I had told you, just let me briefly recall what I had told you about Hegel. I had told you that basically, if you look at the whole idea, hey, stop it, idiots, stop it, no. So I was trying to tell you that the dialectic as we know it in Hegel is at the level of thought. It is at the level of thought. It is something that was the way in which people thought by juxtaposing opposites and through a series of negations, arrived at the correct answer. I told you very clearly, and I hope you remember this, that the dialectic in Hegel is not something which is called thesis, antithesis, and the conflict between the two being resolved by a synthesis. That is not Hegel. That is Johann Fichte, Fichte. I don't know when he became Fichte, because originally he was Fichte. But the Germans, they decided that, it was a good idea to have, what should I say? It was a good idea to have softer sounds because German was accused of being a guttural language. A guttural language is that which is harsh, not literally something from the gutter, no, but anything that has harsh sounds is considered to be a guttural language. The Russians, for instance, thought Russian was a guttural language. So during the time of King Ivan, King Peter, you would see that the official language of the Russian court was French. It was not Russian. Though there was no French occupation of Russia, no such thing had happened. It was Russian that was picked up. The Russians picked up French as their official language of the court. Because I don't know how many of you actually have seen the, what should I say? How many of you have actually heard and know the French language? The French language is full of soft sounds. Like, for example, a sound like, even a simple sound like t is absent in French. It is the softer sound, which is the. The is the sound that comes. Greek language was like that. The reason why people liked the Greek language was because of the fact that it was a soft language. In India, Tamil, for example, is considered to be a very guttural language. Okay, like this whole thing. Dravida Munnetra Kalayam. So though those are not easy sounds to produce. So it's considered to be a guttural language. And for many centuries, the official language of many of the kingdoms in India in the medieval period was Persian, because Persian is a very soft sounding language, but people also decided that it was an alien language, unlike the Russians, who had no problems whatsoever about picking up a language like French and making it their official language. In India, there was a bit of a problem. People didn't want. So you have Urdu. Urdu is a syncretic language. It is syncretic because it has Persian, very little Arabic. It's mainly Persian, and it has Sanskrit. It's got quite a bit of Sanskrit in it, Urdu. And it also has what we today call Hindi and what was at one time called Hindustani. So the Urdu language is considered to be one of the most melodious languages in India. So the Sher Shairi you listen to, or the singing of ghazals, all of them in Urdu is a testimony to the fact that Urdu is a very musical and melodious language. It lends itself to all kinds of musical and melodious experiments. Now, let's not get carried away by language. The Germans had a problem because everybody made fun of them. They said it was a guttural language. So people like Fichte, as they were originally called, all those harsh sounds have been made soft. So CH in most cases became sh. rather than remain her. So Johann Fichte, that's how he became Fichte. What was in English today called Munich, in German it was called München. But because München sounded very guttural, they made it München. Munich in German is München. Anyway, so to come back to the point that we need to make, the presentation of the dialectic as thesis, antithesis, and the compromise between the two of them being synthesis is not a Hegelian exercise. It's not a Marxian exercise. It is an exercise that was carried out by Johann Fichte. Now, if you look at Hegel, Hegel is somebody who basically did not see anything outside of the mind being dialectical, unlike Engels, for example. Friedrich Engels is somebody who says that the world, the matter which constitutes the world, they all move in this fashion, which is, what do we say? It moves in this particular fashion, which is dialectical. Okay. This is not what Hegel had in mind. For him, in order to understand the world, dialectics was a methodology. Dialectics was a methodology. Please keep this in mind because you have a research methodology course. In that, you will require these things. And it's something that you need to understand properly. So dialectics in Hegel is a mental thing where you look at two different things and you see one being negated. Okay, so it's a series of negations until you reach a confirmation. So what Hegel was actually doing was that he was following in the footsteps of Baruch Spinoza, Baruch, Baruch, some people say, but some people say Baruch. Baruch Spinoza, Spinoza, pronounced Spinoza. Spinoza didn't like being called Baruch Spinoza. He wanted to be called Benedictus Spinoza. So probably a good thing to do would be to call Spinoza Benedictus Spinoza rather than Baruch Spinoza. But one thing we can do is we can forget all Baruch. There are not so many Spinozas around. It's not a name like Satish, where you have to say, I'm AV Satish. If you simply say Satish, then who's Satish? Chaiwala, Moz Bandiwala, all of them have this name called Satish. So the AV becomes very important in that, more than Satish. But for Spinoza, fortunately, he's the only Spinoza that people know. So we don't really need to address him by the first name. It's like Hegel. Hegel is Georg Hegel. But there aren't so many Hegels floating around that we need to use his first name. So uh, Spinoza is a fascinating man. I wish I could teach him, but I'm not going to because you're not going to like it. Uh, Spinoza gave the definition of a definition. Okay. Till the time Spinoza gave us a definition of a definition, people simply took a definition to be, they took it for granted. If you say, uh, like the Pythagorean theorem, where you say the square on the hypotenuse is equal to the sum of the square on the other two sides, that's a definition. And people said, this is a definition. Oh, it's a definition, is it? Nobody really bothered to understand what exactly is a definition. Now, Spinoza's greatness lies in the fact that he was trying to understand what a definition was. And Spinoza said, a definition is a negation. Okay? He said, a definition is a negation. How is that a negation? How is a definition a negation? Let's take, can you see this?
Yes, sir.
Yes, sir.
What is this?
A stapler.
Stapler.
Stapler. Right. So that this object is a stapler is a definition and a negation. Can anybody tell me how this is a negation? Anybody? Can you tell me how this is a negation? Okay, let me try.
Negation in the sense, maybe that object which looks like a stapler, it might not be the one.
Might not be the one. Let me, I don't know, make it easy or complicate. What is this that you see in my other hand?
A paper.
A paper. Okay, so what is that? Is that a definition? Is calling this a paper a definition?
No, because a definition should explain about that object or thing.
Spinoza will tell you the moment that you have called this a stapler, it's not a paper. Okay? This, if you have called it a stapler, it is no longer a paper. If this is a paper, it is no longer a mouse. So for him, every definition is a negation. A stapler is a stapler only. You staple paper with a stapler. A stapler is not a pen. A stapler is not a pencil. A stapler is not a piece of cloth. A stapler is not a window. So when you call this stapler a stapler, what you are doing in effect is negating the possibility of this being anything other than a stapler. Okay? You are negating the possibility of this being anything other than a stapler.
Sir, isn't this obvious? And
It is obvious, but
okay.
it is obvious, but it is a negation of the possibility of this being anything else, isn't it?
Right.
For example, I cannot say Padma is a student, okay? Or I can't say Padma is my student and say that this is a definition. It is not a definition because Padma can also be a teacher. Padma takes classes for children in the evenings, right?
Yeah.
So that is not a definition. Padma being a student is not a definition. It's one of the things that she is. But a stapler is only a stapler. There's nothing else. So that's why it's a negation of anything else. Kavya is a progressive farmer. So I can't say Kavya is only a student. Kavya does farming. She grows all kinds of vegetables, fruits, keeps dogs like I do. So these are not definitions.
So, sir, is it not possible to define every object according to Spinoza?
No, you can't define anything that has multiplicity in it. Multiplicity in it cannot be a definition.
Oh, right.
Anything that has multiplicity in it is not a definition. Anything that is uniquely only one thing, that is something that can be defined. Okay, that is the thing that can be defined. Now, Hegel is working with that kind of a thing when he talks about his dialectic. So when he says it's a series of negations, then he's basically saying that you have to arrive at the conclusion. You have to arrive at a conclusion that something is nothing other than one thing. It's a funny thing to say, but I repeat this. Something is nothing other than one thing. That is the dialectic in Hegel. That is the dialectic in Hegel. Okay, so that is why you could probably achieve it in one step, 2 steps, or it may require 20 steps or 25 steps. Hegel doesn't say thesis, antithesis, synthesis, 3 things. That is syllogistic. Anything that is done in 3 stages is syllogistic, right? So
Sir, then why is that thing ascribed to him?
what is ascribed to him?
this three-step process, which he did not
That is a
propound.
wrong thing. That is because there are people like Jadi in the world. The Jadi, it should have been where you put avakai. Okay, that is a definition. By definition, a Jadi is in which you put some kind of avakai or you put some other kind of pachadi. But Jadi is gone beyond the brief. Jadi is writing books. So that is why we have a problem. Got that? Okay.
Yes, sir.
Yeah. So now that is wrongly written. And that is because of the fact that translation is a very difficult exercise. And translations here have been very difficult because of the fact that the German language itself is extremely difficult. It is a very difficult language to master, and most people couldn't do that. And therefore, and when I say most people couldn't do that, I mean even the Germans couldn't master German. Like I'm a Telugu, okay? All right. I was originally a Kannadiga long ago, 4 or 5 generations ago. And then my family decided to become Telugus. But there are other sections of my family where Kannada is still spoken at home and all that kind of thing. Some of them are Marathis like my mother, but they also became Telugus. But if you say I'm a Telugu, I don't necessarily know the whole thing called the Telugu language properly. My Telugu is quite poor. My Telugu is quite poor, as is my English. Okay, most of the time, we think we have some expertise in some language, but quite a few of us don't have any expertise in any particular language. That is the reason why the confusions come up. That is the reason why you have to study a language very, very carefully before using it. Like, for example, how do you translate the word power, okay, into Telugu? Do you translate it as Shakti? Do you translate it as Balam? How do you translate it? There are so many different options that are being given. You have to contextualize the options. You have to contextualize the options and use the right word to represent what the original says while you're doing in translation. Otherwise, like people say, it gets lost in translation. A lot of knowledge, mind you, not just other things. A lot of knowledge which was there in Greek, which was there in Sanskrit, has got lost in translation. When people try to translate, they have to be very, very careful. So a translator has to be a master of the two languages that he is using for translation. If somebody is translating something from English into Hindi, then you need to have mastery over English. You need to have mastery over Hindi. Only then will you be able to establish a proper translation. Otherwise, the translations will become very bad. And instead of conveying one meaning, an intended meaning, they will go and convey an unintended meaning, which is what happens with us a lot in this country, because quite a few people, what do? They just loosely translate. And these loose translations are the ones that have led to the, what should I say, not corruption. They have led to the, what is a good word for it? They have led to, the degradation of knowledge itself. It's not just corruption. It's a degraded knowledge. Degraded knowledge. Let me just give you one example. One example is that one teacher, a lady, asked me to teach roles in Telugu. And I said, listen, I can't do that. I cannot do that because my Telugu is not good. As it is, my English is not very good. My Telugu is even worse. So if you ask me to teach roles in Telugu, I'll teach something which is everything but roles. She said, no, I'll be there with you. I'll do the corrections whenever necessary. I said, okay. Then I talked about redistribution in roles, redistribution of social, primary social goods. And I told him, and I said, not told him, I'm sorry. And I said, this is something which is a response to the idea of distribution in Marx. Marx talked about distribution, but Rawls talks about redistribution. Marx talked about distribution of wealth. Rawls is not talking about the distribution of wealth, but he's talking about the redistribution of primary social goods. I said this in English because I didn't know what to say, how to say it in Telugu. Even now, I don't know. And this lady said, I'll translate. I said, okay. So she says, ఏం లేదు సార్ ఏమంటున్నారు అంటే మార్క్స్ ఎట్లాగా అందరికీ డబ్బు పంచి పెట్టాలన్నాడు అట్లానే రాల్స్ కూడా అందరికీ డబ్బు పంచి పెట్టాలి అన్నాడు. All are Telugus, right?
Yes, sir.
Now,
That's gone totally wrong.
Exactly. So that is where you lose things in translation.
Correct.
And when you come to Marx, people attribute dialectical materialism to him. It is not, Marx doesn't have dialectical materialism. The dialectics that Marx sees is in the way in which history moves. Okay? The dialectics that Marx sees is the way in which history moves. So the dialectic for him is to be found in the base superstructure model that he constructed. The base superstructure model, that is where the dialectic operates. I'll stop here today. It's getting too long. Next time we meet, which will be on Monday, I will basically pick up the base superstructure model in Marx, because if you remember, while teaching Marx, I told you Marx said there was a primitive civilization that gave way to the feudal civilization, and the feudal civilization gave way to the capitalist civilization. How did they give way? Why did the primitive civilization metamorphose into the feudal civilization? And how did the feudal civilization metamorphose into capitalist civilization? And why does Marx call capitalism a negation of a negation? This will pick up for consideration with the base superstructure model on Monday. I don't want to spoil Christmas. Maybe nobody here is a Christian, but my ethic, it's not a moral, tells me that if it was my own festival, I wouldn't have had a class. So I don't want to have a class on somebody else's day of festival. Anyway, my wife is half British, so she's half Christian. So maybe we'll have something. Okay, then. Thank you.
Yes, sir. Thank you,
Thank
sir.
you, sir.
Yeah.
Happy
So,
Christmas and happy weekend.
yeah. So Merry Christmas. Have fun. I'll see you on Monday.
Yes, sir.
Yes,
Thank you so much.
Yeah.
Yes, sir.
Bye, sir. Good night.
Bye. Good night.
Bye, sir.
Bye, Kavya.